everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is on a very highly requested case. Technically, it's a homicide investigation at this point, but this person or this person's body is still technically missing. This is also a fairly recent case. It's just happened pretty much within the past year. It just reached its year mark, I want to say 2 weeks ago when you're watching this. But that is the case and disappearance slash possible murder of Cortney Lake. Cortney was 24 the last time that she was seen on June 7th, 2017, right before 8 p.m. while walking on the street of her home away from her home on Wellington Street in Mount Pearl, Newfoundland. I feel like that was quite the mouthful. Cortney has a 7-year-old young son, and she's left behind not only him, but her family and a bunch of questions that everyone wants answered. The entire community is absolutely rocked by this whole story, and I have seen so much on this particular case alone, probably more so than any other case that I've covered. I've been following it since it started. I was hoping they would have answers within the first year, but since there is nothing yet, I decided to go ahead and cover this case. So, as I said, she was 24 the last time she was seen on June 7th, 2017. And she had a 7-year-old son that she left behind, and she had a bit of a troubled past that I personally am not familiar with. No one's really spoken about it, but she had been dating a man named Jason Pike, and this is the father of her son, and they dated for about 4 years. And he said that she had her own personal demons, and it ended up really pushing them apart. So after 4 years of being together, they split up, went their own ways, and he had pretty much sole custody of their son, while she was off, I'm assuming, kind of trying to figure herself out. Just the year before Cortney disappeared, she had actually been working very hard to restore the relationship she had with her son and a co-parenting relationship with Jason. She was in a much better place in her life. She was living with her parents, and she was trying to involve herself more. She was FaceTiming her son multiple times a week just to talk to him and check up in on him. They would go together, Jason and Cortney, to the park to take him to play. She went with him to swim lessons, and it seemed like she was, as I said, in a very, very good place. But unfortunately, she was in not the best relationship with a man named Philip Smith, and their relationship turned very negative and violent in the months leading up to her disappearance. On April 17th, Cortney's mom decided to call authorities saying that her daughter had been assaulted by Philip. So the authorities went to Cortney's residence and started asking her about this assault. Now, she complained of a sore arm, a bump on her eyebrow, and a cut on the inside of her lower lip. She began to explain to officers that on April 15th, just 2 days before, she had been in some sort of argument with Philip in his truck near the Marine Institute on Ridge Road, near his home on 22 Alice Drive. Now, I'm assuming she tried to get out of the car and he tried to stop her. He decided his way of stopping her would be to punch her once in the stomach and punch her once in the arms. Now, I'm not sure exactly what happened with him after this. I'm not sure if he's immediately arrested. Despite this being a very large and strange case, there's really not that much information out about it online, but this just was the start of a trickle of a ton of other issues that happened in the next few months before she disappeared. So on May 5th, Philip's sister called authorities and said that he was struggling, and she was really worried about him after this assault, after he was facing charges because of this assault. She told authorities that she believed her brother Philip was sitting on RCAF Road near the airport in his black GMC, I think it's Sierra something or another truck. So they used a GPS to track his cell phone and find his location because they wanted to make sure she was right in where he was to complete this welfare check. So an officer arrived on scene and did spot a man matching his description and the truck matching the description that his sister had given. However, when he saw that an officer had arrived, he quickly drove off, and there was a very short chase down one of the main roads right off of RCAF Road. However, the officer ended ended up losing him. So because there was this concern for his well-being, they decided to GPS track his phone again, and they tracked it all the way to Peacekeeper's Way in Conception Bay. So the officers went all the way out there to check on him again, and they found him in a parking lot attempting to harm himself. So he was immediately taken into custody and to a healthcare facility for 4 days. Now, during this whole time frame, I think Cortney didn't think much of the situation. She assumed it was just this simple assault and was just trying to go on about her life as best as she possibly could. I don't think she thought she would have any more issues with Philip. I don't know if he was contacting her during this time, but then he got out of the facility. Now, May 8th is when he was released, and he submitted an application to change the restrictions that the court had put on him after the assault, and after he was then charged with evading police and dangerous driving after he tried to run when he was caught by the airport. He told the judge that he really needed to be able to use his car to get to work. I'm not sure if they totally suspended his license. That's what it's sounding like, but the judge did give him permission. But his next request was a little bit bizarre. He asked if he could contact Cortney because, in his words, he wanted to continue their relationship because they really loved each other. And the judge decided to deny that request completely, and I think this made Philip angry, and obviously this wasn't going to stop him from trying to contact her anyways. So on May the 15th, Philip, I guess, had been spending a few days trying to contact Cortney, and she just wasn't interested, and he found out that she actually had a new boyfriend. So pretty soon after they got into this altercation, which might have started from her trying to break up with him, at least that kind of makes sense in my mind, but do keep in mind that is a complete and total assumption. She had found a new person to date. So Philip obviously was not too pleased with this, so he decided to send nude photographs of Cortney to this other man through Facebook, obviously just to kind of show off and anger him. And this just brought up a whole different issue in court. So not only had he assaulted her, but he was illegally distributing pornographic pictures of her that were given to him under the agreement that they were just for him. She did not agree for them to be given to anybody else. So it was just this one massive struggle between the both of them, and it's like she kept trying to separate herself from the situation, but he just kept coming back and trying to make her feel bad and make whoever was with her feel bad, and it was just very, very unhealthy. The Crown attorney stated while all of this was being addressed that he obviously did this to cause her emotional distress, which should have been, to me, a very, very massive flag. So he first assaulted her, and then he started doing things to not only physically hurt her, but emotionally harm her as well, which are two very horrific forms of abuse. And for some reason, nothing was really being done about all this. It was kind of being discussed, and they were saying, oh, well, you know, he's going through something, we'll just keep them away from each other. But yet again, Philip could not do that. So on June 5th, just 2 days before Cortney went missing, she called authorities to let them know that Philip had called her cell phone and house phone 33 times that day, which is harassment. And at this point, he had a no contact order against her and her mother that he was completely disregarding. So authorities immediately left and rushed to her home, but before they could even get there, Cortney had to call them back again to tell them that Philip had actually showed up to her home. I don't know what he did when he got there, but he angrily left. So at this point, they were now trying to find him, and lo and behold, they found him basically circling her neighborhood. And when they found him, they arrested him. He was being held for multiple reasons. He had been harassing her. He violated his no contact order. It was like he was just committing all these crimes and just completely oblivious and uncaring when it came to all these charges against him and all of these restrictions against him. He just didn't care about them. He repeatedly breached all terms of his contract that had been given to him. So then on June 7th, which I'm assuming was the day that Cortney assumed that she would be able to finally rid herself of Philip, And unfortunately, that's not exactly what happened that day. He had been in jail for 2 days already, and he was set to appear in court. And Cortney was there to actually testify against him. Now, he didn't have any prior criminal record, which I'm sure is very hard to believe because of all the things that I just said he did before this. He had nothing. Nothing. And then in a matter of just not even 3 months, he was able to somehow amass a ridiculous amount of charges, all in a very short period of time, all for very violent and negligent crimes. Because of this, the Crown attorney said, you know, he clearly is in some sort of crisis, and they were trying to use this crisis to basically lessen his sentence pretty much. So Philip did end up pleading guilty to, according to his lawyer, not necessarily admit guilt, but to show remorse for his actions. And his lawyer claimed that because he was pleading guilty, he was showing his willingness to follow the conditions given to him by the court to not contact Cortney. And then Cortney took the stand and basically told the entire courtroom in front of him to his face about all the horrific things he had done to her, how he made her feel, and her obvious lack of desire to have anything more to do with Philip. So after she decided to testify against him and he pleaded guilty, I think everyone thought this was going to quiet down. It was like the last battle, the last hurrah. They both got their last words in. Everything was settled. He would be sentenced and they would go on. So sometime between 3 and 4 p.m. that day, she left the courtroom. And unfortunately, Philip was released around the same time. And just 4 hours later would be the very last time that anyone would see Cortney alive. According to Cortney's mother, Lisa, Cortney just went home after this. I know at some point in the day that day, she went and saw her son. Her parents gave her $10 to take him on this shopping spree at the dollar store, and they said it just made him so incredibly happy. And while I'm happy that is the last memory he has of her, just thinking about that is heart-shattering. Like, not even heartbreaking. That will shatter your heart entirely. But they assumed at this point later on in the day that she was already at home. So her mother called her and said, hey, we've been at a barbecue. We've got some barbecue chicken for you. We've got a salad. And Cortney was so excited. She said she was absolutely starving. So everyone just kind of assumed she'd be home because they were about to be on their way with all this food and she was so starving and so excited for it. However, when they got home, Cortney was nowhere to be found and she had left her key on the stove. This in itself was very odd to Cortney's mom because they did all live in the same home, and despite the fact that Cortney was, you know, a young adult and not a teenager any longer, she still had certain rules that she followed, and there were certain things that were expected of her. She would always call and tell her parents when she was going out somewhere, where she would be, what time she planned on getting back. She would let them know if she was going to stay the night somewhere, so they knew to lock the doors. So the fact that she was saying she was excited for them to come home and bring food and then left somewhere without saying anything didn't quite sit well with them. So they already pretty much assumed something was very wrong. But they waited a little bit, I think gave her benefit of the doubt, and right before they went to bed, they decided to try calling her one more time to see if they should lock the door or leave it unlocked for her return. And she didn't pick up. So this is when they knew something was wrong and decided to file her a missing person. Authorities, given the circumstances, immediately jumped on the case. Just that day, she had testified against a man that had beat her and harassed her, and all of a sudden she goes missing 4 hours after both of them leave the same courtroom. It was already very, very suspicious. So they started going through CCTV in hopes of finding out where she went, if someone picked her up, and they actually found a lot of information. So at around 7:52 that night, Cortney is seen heading off of Wellington Road away from her home. She goes towards Lindbergh Crescent Road and Ruth Avenue. I'll obviously have a map up here so you can kind of see the surroundings. And then at 7:54, a black GMC Sierra truck pulls up beside her and she gets into the passenger seat. Now, the car quickly does a U-turn and speeds off. Now, this would be the last time that Cortney would be seen, is this CCTV footage, meaning that the last person she was known to be with was whoever was driving that GMC Sierra truck. And right after 7:54, there is also no more activity on her phone, no more activity on her social media. Everything went silent. Authorities didn't announce who they thought the truck belonged to, even though I kind of mentioned something about it earlier. They just put this picture out everywhere, hoping that someone else saw this truck that night. There was one unconfirmed sighting of the truck that did come from around 8:30 that night, so just 30 minutes later around Ridge Road, which would make sense. If they left somewhere around 8, it's about a 15-minute drive to that area. If they made any stops, that could account for the missed time. And then authorities found another little bit of footage from the next day on June 8th. This time it is of Philip pulling up in this truck. Again, they hadn't announced it was his yet, I'm sure for legal reasons, but this truck obviously did belong to him. But he pulls up into a gas station, pumps gas, goes inside wearing these very large green rubber boots, and pays for his gas, and then leaves, and then he drives off eastbound towards Hagen Line Road, and then turned left onto Portugal Cove Road heading towards the airport. And then by June 27th, Philip was finally arrested for breaching his conditions given to him by the judge, which included contacting Cortney's mother. Now, the same day authorities arrested him, they searched his home, taking out numerous items and evidence boxes, and they also towed away his truck, which they did finally admit was belonging to him and was the last vehicle that Cortney was known to be in. Everyone knew at this point that this was very, very bad news and nothing positive could possibly come out of this, so authorities as well as family and friends started a massive search, looking in all of the possible locations that Philip might have taken her, the places that he went when he tried to harm himself, all near his home, all near her home. There were over 100 people that were questioned. And then by June 30th, authorities held a press conference where they said that they believed it was now a homicide investigation. She technically is still a missing person, as I said before, but they said due to all of the tips that they had been given that had led them straight to large pieces of evidence, they no longer believed she was alive, and they were now looking for her body and whoever killed her. Then on July 3rd, belongings were found near Patty's Pond, which was just a few minutes away from her home further southwest. Now, I've not been able to find anywhere if they ever ruled out that these belongings didn't actually belong to her, but I've also never seen them confirm they were hers. I have seen other bits of evidence and belongings that were found that they have later gone back pretty quickly and said those don't belong to her. So I'm assuming that these have a very high chance of having something to do with her disappearance. But because of this and because of how promising it was, authorities continued their own search of this area where the belongings were found, but after nothing else was brought to light, they decided to end the search in that area. In August, after questioning Philip a number of times, he finally admitted that he was the one that picked her up in that truck. Now, I know the truck belonged to him, but again, you couldn't see in the windows, you couldn't really see anything, so he had to admit that that was him in the car for authorities to have that confession, basically. I'm pretty sure they were at this point really trying to build a case against him. So he had finally admitted it, but just months later, the unthinkable happened. Cortney's mother had been trying to successfully get a peace order on Philip, which in Canada is basically similar, I guess. The closest thing I can find is to being on probation. You basically have this peace order put on you and you're not allowed to have any criminal offenses charged to you. Like, you cannot get in any trouble whatsoever. You have to stay off the radar basically and behave properly. And after months and months of trying to get this on him, she finally successfully did it. However, they were trying to serve him to come and sign the papers for it, and were having a very hard time finding him. So on the very last day of October, Cortney's mom posted a status on Facebook saying that they had in fact finally found him, and he had to appear in court on November the 7th to sign these papers. But then on the following day, November 1st, which was a Wednesday, Philip's body was found behind his family's cabin in the woods near Bellevue Beach. Authorities have still not released, I'm pretty sure, exactly what happened, they did come out to the scene almost immediately, and they said there was no sign of foul play. It was not criminal in nature. There was no weapon. Everyone is pretty much assuming, and there have been a few articles say that he did die by suicide. So in came the search parties. When I'm saying his body was found and everyone flocked to this area, I am not joking. I think there were about 3 to 4, possibly 5 different search and rescue teams that showed up instantly because people were hoping, as horrible as that may sound, that he had killed himself here, and that was because he would be near Cortney. They thought there might be evidence in these woods. They're thinking she might be in these woods. So they are searching the entire property at this point. They're going to neighbors' houses. Everyone in the neighborhood is just absolutely shocked. They had no idea that he had died. It was just this crazy situation. And Bellevue Beach is, I think, an hour and a half or so away from where they lived. I don't know if his family was there. I don't know who found him, but he obviously got this subpoena to show up in court and decided he did not want to be there. And this started a whole new world of hell for everyone involved in this case. While Philip had never formally been named a suspect in Cortney Lake's homicide investigation, right after his body was found, authorities came forward basically broken and said that he was their only suspect they had, and they had been working on a case against him. And now that only suspect and the person that probably had the answers to find Cortney and what happened to her was now gone, and all of the answers were gone with him. So now it basically became a search to find Cortney's body, and the last search of the winter was done on December 3rd, so just about a month after he passed away. And it was done at an old farm in Bellevue Beach. They were hoping, again, because this is where he chose to kill himself, and this was somewhere that was important to him, that maybe he took her somewhere in this area. And they searched here for 2 to 3 days. It was the largest search they have done to date for Cortney. Had everything possible trying to find her, but after it yielded no results, they decided to end the search. The whole case really slowed down during the winter time because it was cold. It was not ideal weather to be searching, and everything was really quiet. But just a couple of weekends ago, right at the year mark of her disappearance, all of the searches fired up again. And so their very first search was done again the weekend of her first anniversary of being missing, and it was done in the Placentia Junction area. Now, I've looked at a map. I'm not sure what led them here. I think it's very possible that if they assumed he was traveling to the beach after taking her, that this might have been a place he would have stopped to potentially dump her body or dump any sort of evidence. I could definitely see that, but nothing promising was found, and I'm sure they are planning many more searches, and I know that they're asking for volunteers, as many as they can possibly get. Interviews are still being conducted and cross-referencing is being done, and they're still gathering new information, and authorities have asked anyone in any of these areas over that time frame that she went missing, so June 7th of 2017 into possibly June 8th, it would be around nighttime. She was taken right around 8 o'clock, to please come forward with any of that CCTV footage or dash cam, anything possible, because if none of that footage existed, imagine where this case would be. You know, imagine if seeing her walk away from her home, that camera wasn't there. Imagine if the camera that caught her getting into his car wasn't there. This could be a completely different story that I'm telling right now. So it's very possible that there are more answers out there in footage form. It's just the authorities need to get their hands on them. Cortney's son's father, Jason, also spoke with authorities. I'm pretty sure he was questioned. He had his vehicle and everything else searched to make sure he somehow wasn't involved. He was one of the last people to see her that day, as well as her son, so obviously they needed to totally clear the table on that one. He's done a number of interviews where he is absolutely distraught and heartbroken. Their son had really just started becoming comfortable with having her in their lives, and he was getting used to it, and it was his routine now. He knew he woke up in the mornings and she sometimes would call. He knew that she went to swim with him. He knew that they went to the playground, and it's almost like they worked so hard to get to this point, and now she was just stripped away from him again. And he wasn't even sure how to tell his son, your mother is gone and we can't find her. There's no more activity since Philip passed away. They're at this point just searching for a body, as I said, and they are searching hard. They have searched a massive area of land, and authorities have stated that they strongly believe that she might be somewhere very, very close to where she was picked up. And if you look at this area on a map, she was picked up in the middle of a neighborhood. Just down south, there is quite a lot of shopping centers. I hope that they checked security footage from there to see if he maybe went that direction. He could have gone the opposite direction, basically just through neighborhoods, and gotten to his own home in about 15 minutes. I'm sure they have checked all their bases. Authorities are working very tirelessly on this case. Now I'm just going to get into the theories, and obviously there is a very strong theory in this case, and it is that Philip had something to do with her disappearance and possible homicide. Now, after all, he did assault her before, and then he continued to show a pattern of behavior, rash behavior and physical abusive behavior towards her, as well as just harassment towards her. And the fact that it all kind of started so suddenly is what worries me the most. He had no criminal record whatsoever, and I haven't seen any reports from anyone that they had really many issues before this, which honestly makes me think that they got in this argument in his car because she was trying to leave him and he didn't want anything to do with that. She seemed to be really trying to get her life together. She was spending more time with her son. She was dealing with her own personal demons more, and maybe she was realizing that Philip just didn't fit into this new life that she wanted to have anymore, and he didn't like that at all. He also seemed to be in a pretty serious state of denial when you look at his statements that he said to the judge. He genuinely thought that it was acceptable to ask to have contact with Cortney after he had beat her, because he said that he wanted to continue their relationship, and he basically spoke for her emotions, spoke for her intentions. He said that they loved each other. It just seems like he was not wanting to accept something. He was very much so in denial, and he really, really wanted to believe that they were fine, and you guys, you have to understand that when something like that happens, when you literally beat someone, run from the cops, you're thrown in jail, you harass someone, you call 33 times, you cause all these other problems, for you to come out of that and be like, oh, it's all fine, like, we're still together, right? There's something just really not right there. I also wonder if maybe he was suffering an onset of some sort of mental illness. He was, I'm pretty sure, 25 at the time, which is a very prime time for mental illness to onset. Just his very drastic change in behavior does kind of point towards there being something kind of not going right. I honestly wonder if his possible mental illness, if it was handled properly, none of this might have happened. And you know, this is obviously all hindsight, and they didn't know what was going to happen next. There are very many times throughout this short period of time where he does something very violent and very reckless, and if your lawyer has to say over and over again in court that you're suffering a mental health crisis to excuse your behavior, I feel like the court needs to step in at that point, or family needs to step in at that point and say, hey, you need to go to a hospital. You need to be seen. There is something not right. And the fact that that was their excuse, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, then that's fine, we'll just release him again, and then did nothing to help him, does not sit well with me whatsoever. I also wonder if she maybe had plans on meeting Philip that night, and I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, but if you look at their interaction, even though it was very short by the car, it really gets my wheels turning. You know, I'm sure it was very difficult to get up on stand and testify against someone that has been physically and mentally abusive towards you, but unfortunately a lot of victims oftentimes leave situations like that feeling very, very guilty. So I'm wondering if maybe he got in contact with her, lured her in, saying, you know, I finally heard your side of the story, I want to apologize. Or maybe even she got in contact with him and was like, hey, today was really rough, I would like to talk to you about it. Because she had, to her mother, had all intentions of being at home. And then you see her walking up this road and he just is there. Now, he did have a pattern of behavior, so don't ignore this part, but he had a pattern of behavior where he would go and just circle her neighborhood. So while it is likely he was just doing that hoping to find her, I just think it's very coincidental that she just so happened to be walking down her street and he just so happened to pull up at just the right time. Is it possible she just felt so guilty and wanted to say sorry, not knowing what she was walking into? I think that's a very likely scenario. When he pulls up, she doesn't really question getting into his car at all. She gets in willingly, but then he shows kind of where his mindset is when he pulls off, in my personal opinion, because he whips that truck around in seconds and flies off, which to me indicates that he was very, very angry. So imagine hearing someone testifying against you and all the horrible things you did. That would make someone pretty pissed off. It's very possible that he didn't go in with intentions of hurting Cortney, but you know, maybe they went somewhere to sit and talk. You know, he already, you know, went to these different places to go sit when he was contemplating harming himself, and you know, that's a common thing to do. She probably didn't want to go anywhere near his house. She probably didn't necessarily even want to be in the car with him. So what if maybe they went somewhere to talk and they kept getting a little bit more heated and a little bit more heated, and in a fit of rage, he harmed her. I have no idea if they found blood or anything in his car. They haven't released any of that information whatsoever. I know for a fact they did a forensic examination on it. I'm sure they were trying to build a case against him, and I wish they released more, but totally understand why they haven't. Maybe it was something like the April situation where they went to talk things out and discuss things, and he got angry and she felt unsafe and she tried to jump out of the car. And what if she successfully did it and he got out and chased her and then did something to her out of anger that she was, you know, running away? I just see a ton of different possibilities here. Maybe she had no idea he was going to be driving around her neighborhood and she was just going off real quick to run to a store down the road, and then he pulled up and he was like, get in the car. Again, when you are a victim of abuse, your abuser is manipulative. You know, at this point, she was probably so scared, and if he like threatened her or said anything, she would have just gotten in the car scared he would do something crazy. Unfortunately, there are so many little bodies of water in this area. You can get to the beach in 30 minutes to an hour of any direction you possibly went. There are so many large parks with tons and tons of trees surrounding these bodies of water. There's just so many possibilities of where he could have taken her and done something to her to where it would be almost impossible to find her again. When I first started reading into this story, I was really thinking to myself, you know, did they have a special place? Did he have a special place? Did she have a special place? Everyone usually has their place in a relationship where they go and, you know, they go there together and it reminds them of happy times. And if he was really struggling with the fact that she didn't want to be with him anymore, that she was seeing somebody else, he's going to want to do something and take himself back to a happier time. So I wish we knew where their place was. I hope that that's already been checked. I hope that the families thought about this on both sides to double check that there's nothing there. But in all honesty, the likeliness of another theory is so small at this point based on all of this information pointing to her being with her abusive ex-boyfriend right as she vanished, like as she stopped using her cell phone. It just doesn't say anything good. Obviously, he could have killed himself because he was grieving because she was gone and he was being accused of doing something to her. Or there's a possibility that he couldn't handle it anymore, that he was so upset and he knew he did something wrong. Or he could have been suffering with some sort of mental illness that caused all of this. It's just, to me, heartbreaking, and I feel like this is a perfect example of the justice system totally failing everybody involved. I think it's very obvious he was suffering from a serious onset of some sort of mental health issue, some crisis, and you know, the judges knew it, everyone was saying it. His sister called on him for a welfare check, And, you know, the fact that nothing more was really done about it, that could have prevented everything. If he did do something to her and his mental health was taken seriously and he was, you know, treated properly and put in a facility properly for a proper amount of time, none of this might have happened, you know. And then she was so brave on top of that to come forward after being attacked by someone. Do you know how uncommon that is for people that have been assaulted or have dealt with emotional or physical abuse to come forward and testify against that person in front of them, let alone even tell anyone about it? And the fact that this young woman went out and had the balls to do that, it's like none of the steps were taken in order to protect her properly after that. It's just one massive fail to me, and it is so disappointing to see, because these are two things in our society that just are not taken seriously: mental health and abuse. And it's like, you see it and everyone's like, oh, well, that happened then, but it's fine now, or oh, they're not having an episode now, so they're okay. These things are ongoing, and it will keep happening, and it will keep happening, and then situations like this come up. And these weren't just small red flags from Philip. These were not just, oh, like he cursed her out, or, you know, there was this one incident of assault. He went from having no criminal record to breaking an absurd amount of laws, and all of them were violent or domestic in nature. And the fact that he served like a handful of days in jail until he could be seen by the court, and was put in a facility for only 4 days, and that's all that was done. That's ridiculous. This was a terrifying pattern happening right in front of the justice system that was just ignored. At this point, what's really happening in this case, and why I still wanted to talk about this despite the fact that it's not technically a missing persons case anymore, is that the family needs help. They need people to keep their eye out. The amount of area that they have to search is just overwhelming. There is camping going on right now, hunting, fishing. There's so many possibilities that she has been thrown in a body of water. If you're fishing in this entire area, in any pond in this area, keep an eye out. If you are hunting, keep an eye out. They have massive searches for her now that it's summertime. As frequently as possible, I will have the Facebook page linked down below. If you could offer your help, that would be absolutely amazing, you guys. Authorities and Cortney's family are doing their best to try to locate her and to locate any evidence. They have not slowed down on this case, but they always will need help. And her family at this point just is begging for him to have left a clue somewhere, or for someone to somehow have the last missing piece they need to be able to locate her so they can put her to rest. At this point, they're saying all they want is a proper burial. They want to be able to end this and grieve the way that they need to. They need to have some sort of answers, and they need to be able to lay her to rest. She's got a son, you know, people that love her. And the fact that all these answers probably went with Philip is heartbreaking. It can make you feel incredibly hopeless, but as part of the Howland fam, and as we do on this channel, you cannot lose hope. You can never stop searching. You can never give up. It's never too late to keep trying and keep pushing. You know, it's never too late to join in on a search effort. We can do what we can. We can do the best that we can to help this family. I honestly believed that this case would be solved within the first year, and when I found out that Philip had passed away, I had this overwhelming sense of, you know, disbelief and sadness and hopelessness for a little bit, because someone that's guilty is still alive and they're still out there. There's always the chance that they will feel guilty enough to come forward. They still have that information somewhere there in their brain. But if the person that's guilty is gone and left nothing behind to hint to what they did and kept everything locked up tight, the chances of solving everything and successfully finding Cortney, it's just the chances of that go down significantly. So if you could please keep her family in your thoughts. Keep her son in your thoughts and prayers if you pray. I'm sure they would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I'm honestly shocked at how alive her story has been kept over the past year. You don't normally see that, and so I would really like to continue to keep that story alive, and I know you guys will do the same. But I want to thank you so much for taking a little bit of time to listen to Cortney's story today. As always, don't forget, if you aren't already, to subscribe. Click the button real quick, become a part of the Howland fam, so hopefully we can bring them home together, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.